All right, welcome back to the final video, which should be the final video in this short journey, short course on conscious communication. We've been over the basics of the fact that we are interpersonal beings as humans, that we need each other, that ideally we're able to cooperate in a way that's mutually beneficial for everyone. We accept that we're selfish, but that part of being a mature human is learning how to fulfill our needs while also fulfilling the needs of others. We understand that as human beings, we're more similar than we are different. That although we might seem different in a lot of ways, fundamentally, we share similar needs. And it's important to keep this in mind, especially when there's points of tension, conflict, contention, differences in opinion, etc. And then we took a look at our differences in personality that underpin a lot of what goes on between people. We took a little look into our upbringings and the kind of common wounds and patterns and masks that people tend to put on. And we acknowledged that, although we didn't really go into it, we acknowledged that different cultures and educational backgrounds, countries, religions, etc., all kind of teach differences in behavior or in certain beliefs, but while recognizing that fundamentally those beliefs and behaviors are all, again, addressing the same needs. And so if we can keep that in mind, then we can hopefully look past the differences and be able to cooperate more effectively. So now I want to get into some conscious communication frameworks or practices that allow us to be able to communicate and relate more effectively. So without further ado, the first is just a general idea or set of ideas. It's called the 4+1, because there was a fifth one, agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And these are kind of agreements or values that we take on voluntarily, and it helps us navigate life more effectively, with less reactivity, more proactivity, being able to better respond from a place of stillness and calm, and keep our emotions under better control. So the first one is to try to be as impeccable with our spoken word as possible. And there's a bunch of different coaches and teachers who talk about this. Jordan Peterson comes to mind as someone who really is very precise as possible, wants us to be as precise as possible in our speech. Different spiritual teachings talk about the power of words, whether it's neuro-linguistic programming or different spiritual beliefs, the power of spelling, the power of words, the power of attraction, of manifestation, of our subconscious programming. So in general, we want to speak as precisely, as honestly, with as much integrity as possible, just because it influences so much of our lives. The second big agreement this is a difficult one personally for me to adopt and incorporate all the time, to not take things personally, and to just recognize that everyone is projecting their worldview and their reality. And so it's important for us to listen and to take into account what people are sharing, but to not take it personally as a direct attack or as a direct blame, even if they are doing it. The third is not to make assumptions. This is another one that we have to keep in mind, and to just be aware when we are making assumptions and to voice those assumptions. And this helps to reduce misunderstandings and drama and interpersonal conflict, because a lot of times it can stem from misunderstandings and assumptions made by one or both parties. Next, we want to always try to just do our best. And this includes in all areas of life, including upholding these agreements. So recognize that we're not perfect, that it takes effort and time and practice to uphold these agreements, and to be gentle with ourselves when we notice that we're taking things personally or that we're making assumptions. Just do our best. And the last one, be skeptical but learn to listen. So again, this kind of, to me, plays in with not taking things personally. To listen to what other people are saying, but again, recognize it as their truth. Be skeptical, but willing to hear what they're saying and see if it works and makes sense for yourself. So let's begin with verbal communication. Just some tips with regards to verbal fluency. Again, just by prioritizing the impeccability of our word, to be as precise as possible in our speech is a great first step. However, to continue on to that, and this is just regarding conscious communication in general, is considering the impact of our message and to really think about things from the audience's point of view. I know I could probably be doing better with this video, these sets of videos, but and that's why I welcome feedback, is too, so that I can understand more from your perspective what you're looking for, what's working, what's not working, what I'm saying is resonating or not, and that helps me become a better communicator as well. Effective language is clear, it's simple, it's easy to understand, it's well organized, and really great communication hits people in the feels, because as we talked about, we're emotional beings. So, radical honesty. This is a kind of framework, a process that really breaks down the emotions and allows us to communicate, and also allows us to rewire and have more control in that gap of an experience and a response. So as a reminder, an emotion is a subjective experience, physiological response, and behavioral expressive response. And so radical honesty breaks this down. So the main steps. First step, something happens. Let's say this painting falls off the wall. So the first step is just to notice something that happens, and this can be through the five senses. Something we smell, taste, touch, hear, see. So in this case, I see or I hear the painting fall. The next step is to identify the emotion that I feel or that I'm experiencing. So let's say it's anger that comes up. I notice that I feel angry. The last step is to identify the mental construction or the story. So I imagine I'm angry because I imagine that whoever put the painting up did a horrible job, and now I have to redo the video, so I'm angry. So those are the three steps. Observing it through sight, sound, through the five senses, emotion, anger, and story. And doing this allows us to, one, be more present to the different aspects of our emotional response. But secondly, it allows us to reprogram our subjective experience, because what we end up realizing is that by changing the story, we can have an effect also on the emotion. So I notice again that the painting falls down, and instead of angry, I am excited. I'm excited because now I get to actually take a closer look at the painting, which I never would have really, because I don't really notice these things. Or I'm grateful because I imagine that I'm so blessed to be able to be living in a place that even has paintings on the wall, for example. And so it's just a slow process of recalibrating our mental circuitry instead of defaulting to the standard emotion that we're used to experiencing, taking the time to rewire it into emotions that we'd rather feel more consistently on a daily basis. And I believe that this helps us to eventually build up different neurological circuitry to experience different emotions for the same external stimuli. Next, and this is nonviolent communication. This works a lot more with interpersonal, and it's very similar to radical honesty. It begins with an observation, talks about the emotions. In this one, you can also, I would combine the two and also talk about the story that you're constructing, and maybe sharing a little bit more about what needs are or are not being fulfilled. And lastly, any requests for behavior from someone else. So especially if this is, an interpersonal conflict, we discuss the needs that are or aren't being met and the request for someone else to perform some kind of strategy or action or behavior that would help fulfill our needs. And again, it's a request, it's not a demand, so it is up to the other party to determine whether they would like to adhere to our request, and if not, then we can continue the negotiation practice. Nonviolent communication is important because it, again, begins with I, with what emotions I'm experiencing. It's not an attempt to control anyone, it's a request, and we're trying to minimize blaming or criticizing. And also, once we get very good at nonviolent communication, although it's something again I like to continue to work on as well, even if the other person is not using this technique, we're able to break down what they're saying, again, to identify what they're experiencing, what emotion they're having, what story they're creating, what needs aren't being met, and really what requests for behavior they have, and then we can respond accordingly. Imago relationship therapy. Just to break it down, it's a communication tip that Jordan Peterson talks about, especially when you are feeling that there's a kind of blockage in your communication with someone, for example, partner. What you want to do to increase your understanding and empathy is to repeat what they're saying to the point that they agree with your summary. So for example, if my partner is sharing something, what I want to do is say, okay, so what I'm hearing is blah, 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 blah. And it gives her a chance to agree or disagree. Like, yes, I agree with your summary of what I'm sharing. What you're hearing is correct. Because so often, especially if you're speaking different languages or you're emotional or whatever the case may be, we hear, or we're making assumptions, we hear and what the person's trying to say can be very different. And then once you get into a back and forth and people's egos and defensiveness comes up, like there's so much lost in translation. And so taking the step back to really emphasize that what I'm hearing is X, Y, and Z, and letting them correct you or agree with you allows us to take a step back and allows us to empathize, to make sure first we're getting right what we're hearing. We're getting validation that that what we're saying is accurate, what we're hearing, what we're claiming to hear is what they're saying. And the next step would just be to share empathy, like I understand how you might be feeling. I imagine, I can see your point of view. This helps to, again, increase understanding, increase empathy, reduce the negative, hurtful language to create a safer environment to express what's going on with each other, and opens the door for more curiosity, more collaboration, and exploration. Lastly, as mentioned, nonverbal communication is huge. We talked about microexpressions. In general, a lot of communication is nonverbal. Some people will say 60 to 90%. And so body language is huge, right? And whether it's pointing the direction of where we're pointing, our engagement factor, hand gestures, it's all part of creating a comfortable, safe environment and feeling for someone else. And so it's just good to be aware of that when you're communicating. For example, laying back is more of a sign of disinterest, leaning forward is a sign of interest, body facing forward, things like that. So that is it for this video. I hope you got something out of it. I know it's a lot of information. It takes repeated practice and review to continually get better at these techniques, but over time they do become a part of your repertoire, and it just makes communication so much more fulfilling and helps us reach across the aisle, especially with people who are so different, who can be so different, but underneath that, we're all the same. So that concludes this little course. Again, please let me know how I can improve. I will continue to make it better and better for you all. So just let me know, and hope you got something out of it. I hope it's helped you in some way. That's all I hope to do in my one lifetime here, prior to my next reincarnation, if that is what it takes to continue on this journey. So good luck, and wishing you all the best out there. Thank you again for your time, for your trust, and for your willingness to put in the work. Till next time.